OK. Well, let's see what you've got to say about this question, then, from Arthur Webber.
You've supported moving to an insurance-based healthcare system in the past. How can we trust you with the NHS?
Well, I tell you what. OK. And this is the Labour spin, and it's what people believe. Let's face one thing. The NHS has a major, major crisis. What is it? It is the rapid growth of the UK population. Our population is growing at 500,000 people every year, and we do not have the facilities to catch up with it. Let's be clear. I think that if the wealthiest in society took out private medical insurance, were encouraged to do so, we could lift maybe as much as 10% of the burden off the NHS for those who can't afford private insurance cover. Strikes me as being a rather bright thing to do. On all the other things, you know, we've got many medical professionals standing for us as candidates in this election, one or two actually rather prominent and well-known ones. We all want a National Health Service that works. I've had more need of it than most people with several disasters in my life, and when it comes to emergency care, there's nothing better in the world. But I am struck by one thing. Everybody says we must put more money into the National Health Service, and with a population rising at 500,000 a year, they are absolutely right. So if we all agree, you know, and Mr Corbyn can say what he likes, but let's remember it was the Labour Party that went for the PFI deals that have left the hospitals in so much trouble. It was the Labour Party that privatised vast chunks of the health service. So enough of Corbyn's hypocrisy on all of this. If we're now all agreed that we all want a well-funded, well-running health service where money is not being wasted, if we all agree, could there ever be a better subject upon which all the parties come and work together to get a health service that delivers the best for the British people?
But just so we're clear, what you're saying is you do not support the idea of an NHS free for all at the point of delivery. You think for those who can afford it, they should pay?
I think the NHS should be free for all at the point of delivery. But I do think, given particularly waiting lists...
But for those who can afford the insurance, they should have that, so it wouldn't be free for them.
Well, those that... I'm not forcing people who earn over X per year to take out private insurance. I am suggesting that as a way of reducing waiting lists and lifting the burden off the health service, it would make a lot of sense.
Who went back there with the glasses?
One of the main problems the NHS is currently facing is an ageing, obese population. That isn't the fault of our increasing population. And as far as EU workers are concerned, other EU citizens are working in the NHS, not using its services.
Well, some work in the NHS, yes, but millions use it as well. Look, I don't get this argument. I don't see why we want to take nurses and doctors from Romania or Bulgaria, or even worse, countries like Mauritania, countries that need medical services even more than we do, and yet we're happy that nearly 40% of doctors are foreign trained. And I think, actually, perhaps the biggest investment this country needs is to invest in its young people and encourage people to train as nurses, as doctors, as engineers. I think that would be a marvellous investment for our future.
There's lots of hands up. Let me take a few points at once. The woman here with the scarf.
Hello, I'm a GP in Peterborough, John Practice in Peterborough. How, if you develop this model, would you prevent a two-tier system? And how, going back to the point you just made, would you staff that in terms of getting enough doctors? We have a GP crisis in Peterborough. We can't get enough doctors.
I know we've got a GP.
No, Mr Farage, I'm just going to take a few points at once, if I may.
Fine.
The woman behind you.
Why are you blaming Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party for the issues in the NHS when your best friends, the Conservative Party, have been in power for 9 years and Jeremy Corbyn has separated himself from New Labour?
And just the man at the back there.
You're misrepresenting this. It's well known that we have an ageing population, and also because of technological advances, there is a funding formula of inflation plus a margin. That's not been stuck to. The National Health Service is a bargain. We just need to fund it correctly, and then the doctors and nurses will be able to do their job properly.
We can bury... if you want to bury your head in the sand, you can. But the fact is, nobody could have predicted 10 years ago that we would have a population rising by 500,000 a year. There was no forward planning for this level of population growth because we were not in control of the numbers coming in every year. They are consequences that we have to live with, and they're consequences we now have to plan for. on Jeremy Corbyn. Look, Jeremy Corbyn says, we invented the NHS back in the 1940s. Whenever we've been in government, it's been fantastic. When the Tories are in power, it's dreadful. He completely forgets the period of time when he himself was a Labour Member of Parliament, when things like the disastrous PFI contracts came in. All I'm saying is, Mr Corbyn, stop accusing everybody else of having the wrong view on the NHS. Your party did, and I repeat the point I made earlier, if ever there was an issue to work together on, you know, I really can't think of a better one than this. On the GP crisis, on the two-tier system, look, you could argue there's a two-tier system already. There is already private medical facility in this country. Actually, it's something that brings in a lot of foreign money. A lot of people from overseas come to London and use private medical facilities. All I'm saying is when I talk to GPs like yourself, they all say the same thing. We're under greater and greater pressure. Our patients are getting angrier and angrier that we can't provide the service that they need. And of course, you know as well as I do that what happens is because we don't have enough doctors and the surgeries aren't open long enough, what do? They go to A&E. People that shouldn't need to go to A&E do. So look, you know, I fully accept we need more resource, but I do honestly believe, and I made this point to the lady over there, let's start training more of our own doctors and nurses. That surely is the best investment we could make in the National Health Service.
A couple of questions here. Yes, the man in the blue shirt.
Hello there. I'm a consultant in elderly medicine, and our hospitals need our care system to work so we can function properly. Where are we going to get our carers from? Because the majority come from around the world and mainly European.
Can we just be clear what your policy, Mr Farage?
Firstly,
Farage, wait a minute. Can we just be clear what your policy is on this? Because you talked about, you've talked about in the past about having a cap on immigration of 50,000.
Yes.
There are 100,000 vacancies in the NHS at the moment. Is that still your policy?
Here's the problem, right? We are confusing two things. We are confusing work permits, people that come to Britain to work, whether it's for 6 months or a year or whatever it is, with the right to automatic settlement. They are two completely different things.
But the argument, of those people come here to work and live.
The argument to your question is, if we haven't got sufficient people to fill those jobs, we will take people in who are good enough with a work permit system. But because you come here to get a job, just as if you went to 200 countries around the world and got a job, it doesn't give you the automatic right to settle, doesn't give you the automatic right, ultimately, to claim citizenship. There is a distinction between the two, and it's an important one.
And do you still want a cap on immigration?
I do not think that our quality of life in this country improves as our population heads inexorably towards 70 million, which is where it's going to be by the end of the 2020s.
So what do you think that cap should be?
We, for 60 years after World War II, had annual net migration running at 30 to 50,000 a year. We had actually had, I think, of all the European countries, the most successful integration. Things worked here well. For the last 10 years, it's been running at between 250,000 and 1/3
so 30
every
to
year.
50,000.
We need to bring settlement down to that kind of sensible post-war number, yes.
Let's take a question from John Airy.
How do you respond to claims that you're racist?
I haven't... So, OK, you'll love this. You'll love this. You'll love this. So I was at the BBC on Sunday morning, on with John Pienaar, left at 10 a.m, and one of the security guys said, there's a protest outside. I said, it's OK, I'm used to that. So I walked out, and there they were, carrying placards, about a dozen of them. Jeremy Corbyn's a racist. Jeremy Corbyn's an anti-Semite. Jeremy Corbyn's the terrorist friend. And I walked past these protesters, and they came up and asked me for selfies with them. All right? I have not had an accusation like that made for many, many years. It was made in the past. Do you know why? Because nobody else dared to talk about it. The issue had been brushed under the carpet, despite the fact at the time it was the #1 issue in British politics. And I would suggest, sir, that in this campaign, what we ought to talk about is illegal immigration. What we ought to talk about are all those people being found dead in the back of a lorry. What we ought to talk about are the 39 people who were picked up in the English Channel yesterday, who are currently in police custody, tomorrow will be in a hostel, and the day after will disappear. We need to send a message. We're not open for illegal immigration. We're open for legal immigration or a sensible work permit scheme. And that, I think, needs to be talked about in this campaign.
Does that satisfy you? Do you agree with that?
I think it's definitely an accusation that's levelled at your party.
No, it's not. We had more ethnic diversity in our candidates for the European elections than the other parties added up together. So I won't have that.
I don't agree with it.
All right, thank you. But I honestly, as far as the Brexit Party is concerned, people just do not say that.